All right, it is 3 o'clock. Let's call this to order. Paula, can you do roll call?
Matt Guillory.
Here.
Jorge Charnico.
Here.
Dylan Bradway. Betsy Brunstetter. Donna Cervantes. Tyler Holmes. Lee Peoples.
Here.
Ben Sellers.
Here.
And James Barnum. You have a quorum.
Thank you. All right. In your packets, you had minutes from the September 27th meeting. You've had a chance to look over those. Can I get a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? The minutes, the motion to approve the minutes passes. All right, we have no cases withdrawn, no continuance requests, and nothing on a consent docket. Let's jump right into individual consideration cases. First one is 519 Northwest 23rd Street.
Yes, this case is one that the Commission dealt with fairly recently in July earlier this year. And you may recall that the proposal was to install 3 tenant ID signs in the public right-of-way along Northwest 23rd Street for the Rise. And there was a variance required for that because of the signage in the public street right-of-way. And the Commission did provide a recommendation of approval on that variance to the Board of Adjustment. However, the signage also has to go through review as part of the revocable process, a revocable permit process through Traffic Commission review, traffic staff. And they expressed some concern with one of the 3 signs, the easterly-most sign that's closest to the driveway on 23rd Street. And as a result of that, the applicant was not able to convince the traffic division that that sign was acceptable, and therefore they've needed to modify their proposed sign package from 3 signs down to 2. And so what they've done essentially is eliminated the westerly sign closest to the driveway, and they've increased the height of the 2 remaining signs to accommodate 6 tenant ID banners as opposed to 4, which is what they were approved for in the previous approval. Normally, this is something that we could probably approve administratively as staff. However, the condition of approval that was attached to the project was very specific in terms of the way the signs were configured and how the tenant ID signs were, how many were supposed to be on each side and which tenants could have them and so on and so forth. And as a consequence, condition language is something that cannot be modified administratively. So we brought it back to the Commission for that change. So in addition to the actual physical change in the sign program from 3 signs down to 2 and an increase in height in the 2 remaining signs, we've also brought back to the Commission revised language for the condition of approval that reflects the proposed sign program as it is today. And assuming we're not going to get into the variance discussion today because that's already been granted by the Commission or recommended for approval by the Commission, eventually after this, if this is approved, then they will head on forth to the Board of Adjustment for action on their variance, which they should be, assumably should be able to get some support for at this point with the elimination of the westerly sign. So that completes our presentation. We're prepared to respond to any questions the Commission may have.
Okay. Before we get into questions, I assume you're here to speak on behalf of?
Only if we need to.
Okay.
For you with that.
Well, let's jump straight into questions. Anybody have any questions before?
I was a little concerned if there was a little trouble with the specifics of the previous recommendation. I'm wondering if we have to be so specific in the recommendation. I don't see any problem with approving this. I just wonder if it can just be approved without the limitation on the, there's so many caveats here. They shall not be on more than one sign or more than one side, or is there a reason that specifics had to be added?
If you want to modify the proposed condition of approval, it's the commission's, they have latitude to
Does it-
modify or eliminate various provisions of the condition.
Had it come up in discussion, or was that in response to concerns by anyone?
That was a condition originally drafted in the previous approval by staff to address, I guess what you might call overexposure concerns, that, number one, most of the tenants that, in fact, all of the tenants that have frontage on 23rd Street have signage out front, so they shouldn't be allowed to go on these signs. That was one thing we were trying to avoid. You get some overexposure there. In fact, most of the tenants have two signs. They have one under the canopy and one over the canopy. So there's already a lot of signage on the front of the building for those tenants that have frontage on 23rd Street. So we wanted to make sure it was reserved only for those tenants that don't have the exposure on the front of the building.
Okay.
And then we felt it's kind of redundant to have, let's say Old School Bagel wants to be on both of the signs. We didn't think that was appropriate either. There's enough tenants in the back of this building that need the exposure to fill up both sides of these signs. So we're trying to kind of provide some reasonable restrictions. When we talked to the applicant about it 3 months ago, when it originally went to the commission, they didn't have any concerns with these conditions. And that's kind of the background behind why we're here today.
Sure, yeah. Seems like it would, if anything has to change, one tenant, or I guess I was wondering if there's a way to avoid them having to come back in the future, but I don't have a problem with the way it's written.
Do these conditions work for the needs of the building and your tenants?
Ideally, in the beginning, we did want to include the tenants that were in the front of the building, just because the signage is so small on 23rd Street. Even the signage of the tenants that have it on the frontage on 23rd, it's really 12 inches by 3 foot. But that was a condition that was met by Michael to allow it, to become this far in the first place. So it's not ideal, but
Seems like it seems like you've made a compromise, and I applaud the compromise, to go from 3 signs to 2, and then expand the size of those 2 signs just to have enough room to fit the rear tenants, correct?
Well, there was originally 4 tenants on 3 signs each. So we took the 4 tenant spaces that were on the 3rd sign and we added them to this sign. So the overall square footage of these signs did not change. The only thing that changed was the tenant boxes that are in the brushed aluminum. So there was a logo where it said parking in rear, but we took that away and then increased the height of just the tenant box. But the overall square footage did not change.
Okay. What is the height on those now?
The overall height
Yes.
from grade level to the top of the sign is 9 foot. So that would be the concrete to the top. From the planter to the top of the sign is 7 foot 2 inches.
Okay. So I guess my point is, if you are only fitting the rear tenants on these 2 signs, in order to fit tenants that front on 23rd, it would require another sign?
No, it would not. So the tenant spaces, to accommodate the back tenants, they can be, the tenant panels themselves can be, the sizes of them can be changed. So let's, hypothetically, if Old School Bagel wanted to do 2 spots, they could do that. It would just be a bigger logo on the sign. It doesn't necessarily mean that they only have to take a 10-inch space.
Okay.
So.
Donners, does that help
That's-
clarify what you were asking about?
As long as there's some flexibility, I think that helps in the future, as things may change. And I agree that I think limiting to the back seems fair. It's not over signage for those in the front. But if you don't have any other concerns, then just want to make sure it was agreeable.
Ideally, there was discussion initially to be able to provide signage for the tenants on this marquee sign for all of them. If the commission would be in favor of that, we would ask that that be provided.
How many tenants do you have in the front, and how many do you have in the back?
Well, the answer to that is it changes through the years. Currently, we have Cox Communications, Robert Cromian Salon, Interior Gilt, Anytime Fitness, Walgreens. I guess the Art Hall would be considered a tenant along, but it does not have signage. The Drake would not be included on this, although they are frontage. So to answer your question, I guess you'd have 6. 6 in the front.
And how many in the rear?
Sure. 2. You would have Old School Bagel and Urban Tea House. Now, depending on the count, we also have the Pump Bar, which is technically a tenant in the Rise, and we also have Pizzeria Gusto, which is also a tenant in the Rise. So if the numbers permit, based on flexibility of how retail spaces work, and they change.
So,
I'm sorry, we have another one, Innovative Software.
so
They do not
three
have
in
front.
the back,
Yes, and
plus the
Noodle
two.
Stream, they're another tenant on the upstairs.
Okay, so 4, okay. So, forgive me if I'm misunderstanding something. You have 12 spots, and if it's restricted to use for rear tenants only, you only have 4 rear tenants?
Correct. We would have Old School, Tea, Noodle. Yes, so the intent really is to have all tenants have a spot on there. That is the initial intent. That would be the initial ask. That was the initial ask.
Excuse me. So with the restrictions as they are, you would have
A problem.
blank placards in here, right? Okay.
Or you could make them a different size?
Yeah.
Is that allowed?
Yeah, and as I said before, so you could actually, so 10 inches, it's very small, so you could increase the size of the tenant panels to fit the back tenants, but like you said, ideally, if it were allowed to, have a change in the condition to include the tenants on the front of the Northwest 23rd, that would
That's the intent.
be ideal.
Well, my recommendation, I feel like it's fair to the other retail establishments on the street that don't have signs in the right-of-way, and that this is an added benefit for those in the back only. But I would be okay with recommending take off that limitation to not being allowed, shall not allow any tenant to have identification on more than one of these 2. Would it help if you could, if you had 4 tenants and there were 4 on one side and 4 on the other
I'm sorry.
of
what was your
the 2
question?
signs?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I didn't quite understand.
I agree with staff that limiting it to the rear is fair because it doesn't give undue advantage to other retail establishments on the street that do not have signage in the right-of-way. That's an added benefit that we're giving, but that's being offered because of lack of frontage. So it should only be limited to those that don't have frontage. I agree with that. But perhaps the recommendation of not allowing any tenant to be on more than one of the 2 signs, would it help to ease that restriction? Because you're limited now to, no tenant can be on more than one of those two signs.
So you're saying allowing the back tenants only to be on more than one of the monument signs, but not allowing any of the tenants on the frontage of 23rd Street to have
Right,
spots.
right. Continue with that restriction, but ease that second one. Just to give some more flexibility.
I appreciate that. One of the issues that we have is Art Hall is a tenant with 23rd Street frontage without 23rd Street signage because of the narrow corridor where it is situated. Would they, in essence, be able to be on this? Under the current verbiage, the answer would be no, to my understanding.
They don't have a sign because there's not enough space?
Yeah, it's a pretty narrow corridor that's maybe 15 feet wide. The initial design was to allow pedestrian access from the parking lot to 23rd Street. So we decided to utilize that and make it a functional space other than just a hallway. So you can actually go in right now and buy art off of the walls. And so there is a business and a tenant called Art Hall operating in that space. Based on the verbiage here, if I'm understanding it correctly, it would prohibit them from having signage.
It would prohibit them from having signage on these signs, but they could put it on the building.
Correct? They could?
If they
That would
wanted
be an
signage
option.
on the frontage, they could put it on the building.
They could.
Just make a couple comments here. Seems like trying to determine or justify or restrict or allow which individual tenants go where is maybe a little cumbersome or burdensome and beyond what we need to be doing. If we're okay with the size, height, square footage of signage that's proposed, which is in essence the same square footage that was approved previously, I don't know that we want to get into the job of determining which tenant goes where, especially on a complicated building with side tenants, rear tenants, detached tenants, and all the above. So I'm going to make a recommendation to approve the application on the basis the project meets the regulations and guidelines of the Urban Design Overlay District zoning ordinance as referenced in section B5 and C of the staff report, with the conditions that these freestanding signs be limited to the maximum of 6 tenant IDs per sign and shall have the same tenant identification on both sides of each sign.
Do I have a second?
I'd second that.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed?
Aye. Opposed.
Okay. We have one opposition vote. The motion carries, and it is approved.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your consideration.
Thank you. All right, next on the agenda is 610 Northwest 23rd Street.
The applicant contacted us earlier this morning and indicated they'd like to have their item continued to the December agenda.
We need a motion.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. And Michael, you said to December, not, so it's not next month, we're continuing
Yeah, we
that
gave
2
them the
months?
option of November or December. They're having some internal meetings, one of which was canceled this morning, so that put them off. And I'll get to it later, but the November meeting is a week earlier than it normally is, so
Right.
it's even less of a time frame, a window to work in. So they chose to go with December at this point.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to other business, we have the Downtown Development Framework.
The commission is being asked with this item to adopt the downtown development framework as a supplemental guideline for your use in reviewing development in the areas that you have purview over. This is a document that's been around for about 18 months, approved by the council in 2016, at one point, 2015 actually. And it has been adopted by DDRC because that is primarily where a lot of the territory that the DDF covers overlaps their purview as well. Over the past 14 months, we've been working with a variety of contingents of property owners, residents, and other developers and such that have interest in either doing development or seeing how the forward-looking future of the Cottage District looks. And there's a variety of people that have a variety of concerns. Not all of those concerns are on the same page or coming from the same direction. Over the past 14 months, city staff has been working with these groups in focus groups and a variety of other meeting formats to try and sort out what can be done to try and reconcile some of these concerns that are out there. At the end of that process, we came to the conclusion that there were a variety of things that could be done to amend the municipal code as it pertains to the GT1 district and address those concerns. And that will be coming back before the commission at a later date when we have that ready for you to take under consideration and recommend to the Planning Commission and the City Council. However, the other component, major component that was the outcome of these efforts over the last 14 months was that the consensus was that the commission should adopt the DDF as a supplemental guideline for your use in reviewing development, particularly as it pertains to the Cottage District, because that's the one area that the DDF covers that is under your purview. So that's why we brought it before you today. We have Sarah Welch here available for any questions that you might have about the background on how we got to where we are today from when we started back in August of 2016. And she and I will try and answer whatever questions the commission have.
Thank you. So what do you need, just so we're all clear, what do you need from us today? Are we adopting,
There's a resolution in the packet for you to adopt,
Okay.
to adopt it as a supplemental guideline for your use in reviewing projects under your purview.
And before that, there's opportunity to discuss or ask questions?
Correct.
Okay. We'll get into questions in a second. I'll just say I read through it, and it seems like it's going to be a document that's going to be helpful. I kind of wish that it applied to more of our jurisdiction than just the Cottage District. Do we have specific questions or broader questions, comments?
Well, I just have a comment as the commissioner that sits in the Cottage District. I guess you could say I like the framework. I wish we would have adopted it a couple of years ago. I know that it was presented to the UDC and then I guess nothing was done, but I like the way it treats the Cottage District, and I hope that we adopt it today.
All right. I actually do have a question, or maybe more of a comment. The last couple of pages, starting on 64, it's the design and character guidelines, and our old dreaded word character comes up here, so it's potentially, that word has bitten us a few times in the past. I guess my questions were about the headings of the individual columns. The middle column being key character elements. For Cottage District, there's one that I see may be problematic, but there's others, like upper class, for instance, several large billboards, lower class and large industrial parcels. To me, that that column seems to be describing current conditions, possibly more than redevelopment character goals or objectives. Is that, do we predict any confusion or justification that we're going to have to do in the future for that?
That column is really reflective of the current conditions. I don't think it's indicative of the future.
I see your concern, though. If you're describing the current character and people come to us and say, well, we're just protecting the character, and if the character today includes elements that the public might prefer not be continued.
And not necessarily things that we have any, for instance, the Cottage District, the one that is applicable to us, has views of downtown, and we've gotten into an issue in this commission before with views not being, sightlines not being protected. So it was, it was, a proposal was opposed because it blocked people's views, but it wasn't something we had any real power or jurisdiction over doing. So it's just a comment, but that word character there might be something that comes back to be potentially problematic.
Yeah, and I think that the DDF is going to be undergoing some refinement in the coming months, and that probably will be something that gets looked at in the future.
Okay.
Because it is coming up, the word character came up in Lincoln, our draft of the Lincoln overlay, and it comes up here, and it comes up, as you know, the word character is present in the text of the DDD1 that pertains to cottage as well. So that's something we're going to try and attack. I know that I am going to be trying to come up with something alternative to that for you when we bring Lincoln back to you. And I know that everybody's cognizant of the problems that word can create, and we're going to, I guess, attempt to seek another way to, I guess, put a bow on that for you and make it less cumbersome.
Okay. Like I said, it's just a comment. I know it's very hard to do that. I know we've just been overturned by BOA because of their not liking the use of character as our justification for a decision. Other questions, comments?
Yeah, I did have one question on that page 66 under the key character elements. Compact neighborhood form. What does that mean? Do we know what that means? I didn't find a definition of it.
It's not defined in the document at all. I think primarily it's just speaking to the fact that you have smaller blocks, relatively uniform lot patterns for most of the area. And up until now, you've had relatively small size residential structures there. So I think that's the intent of that reference.
Anything else? I was looking at page 58 to see if that gave any more. I don't know if it does, though. All right. So, if no other questions, is there a motion?
I move that we adopt the resolution.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. All right. Administrative approval report.
And we have 4 items for you on this portion of the agenda. Items 1 and 3 are minor sign applications. Item 2 is a storefront modification to a project that was originally approved administratively in the first place. Item 4 is a pretty extensive list of minor things that still add up to less than 20% of the building at the Taco Mayo on the east side of North Classen Boulevard near 30th. So those 4 items were already approved administratively by staff.
On item 4, I know the original proposal was to do a large addition to demolish some old buildings and do a large addition. Is that still happening, or is that?
This is a different site.
Oh, okay.
This is the existing Taco Mayo. It's staying at Taco Mayo, but they're just doing some exterior renovations.
Okay. Sorry, I had the wrong. Am I talking about the closures?
The closures, okay. On the closures, we routinely, after 6 months of no forward progress on the applications, there's provisions in the bylaws of the commission for staff to close out cases where there's been no forward progress over 6 months period of time. So we closed these 2 cases out. The item at 2720 North Classen, item number 1, we've spoken with the applicant on that since we informed them of their case being closed out. And they've indicated to us that they have intentions of still pursuing the project, but at a much reduced density and intensity on the site than what was previously seen in the SPUD that was processed for the site. So I'm not sure what their intentions are now for the existing buildings that were going to be demolished under the previous proposal. We have not seen a new application to replace this one yet, so we're not sure how they're going to proceed, but we just know it's going to be much less of a building than it was before.
Okay, and that's the one I was talking about. I jumped ahead. So practically speaking, they will be starting over?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions? All right. Comments from planning staff?
I just want to remind the commission that we do, the meeting for November is a week earlier. It's on the 15th, not the 22nd. We do that every year to move it away from the Thanksgiving holiday and to try and make sure that we have a quorum. We do have cases on that agenda. We have had submittals. The deadline was yesterday, and we got 2 cases in at the last minute. So we'll be bringing those back forward to you for your review.
And what's the December date?
December date is the 20th. That's also moved up a week.
Okay. Yeah, that's why I just wanted to bring attention to it. Any other comments? Comments from commission members? All right. Our next meeting is December 15th, like Michael just said. Thank you. November, sorry. November 15th, December 20th. Thanks.